everyone. Welcome to another edition of Bitcoin Lore Review, the show that we have not been able to bring you in a long time. I will continue to say this is one of my favorite shows because, my bad on that one. Mostly because I like to learn myself. A lot of the other shows, I'm the one educating. But on this show, I get to learn from the experts, and this is absolutely great, which is why I really like this show. All right, so for today, we're going to start off with our 4 guests that have all been on the show before. Hopefully, a few more will jump on. Bill, what's up in your world out in California? It's been about 2 months since we've done this.
Yeah, it's hello everybody. Welcome back. This is one of my favorite extracurricular activities. Bill Restis. I'm an attorney here at Restis Law Firm in San Diego. Some of the recent things that have been going on in my Coinbase class action for unclaimed Bitcoin. A few weeks ago, the judge in San Francisco allowed the case to proceed. And this case is on behalf of everybody who was sent Bitcoin through email on Coinbase and who didn't collect the Bitcoin. What we found out was there's millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin that was sent. It was never claimed, and Coinbase is keeping it. So that's the most interesting thing in the past few weeks. That's me. I'll shut up now. And Tone is.
Sorry, guys. I was having like sound issues on my end. I can't hear you at the moment, but Manny or Sasha, take over, introduce yourselves while I get my stuff solved.
Go ahead, Manny.
Oh, I got you. I heard that.
Hey, everybody. I'm Manny Alejandro. I'm an attorney in New York. I have my own law practice. I focus on blockchain. I've been in a really aggressive business expansion mode, so happy that taking on new clients. Things are going well. Exciting opportunities. With that being said, as soon as things started to take off, the market obviously is in a bearish decline. So we'll see how things kind of turn around, but everything's good on my end. I mean, really interested in kind of how a lot of the movement we had in the market, and with regard to regulation, we had a couple of bills that I know we haven't met in a while and spoken in a while, but there are a couple of bills dropped by Republican congressman from Minnesota named Emmer, which were very pro-crypto regulation. There were 3 separate bills. Now with the change of the House of Representatives to Democrat and the leadership, particularly at the Financial Services Committee, it's most probably will be Maxine Waters. Interested to see kind of what happens, what our efforts legislatively, but only time will tell. But really happy to join you guys again.
All right, awesome. And last but certainly not least, Sasha.
Hi, Tone. Thanks for having me on. Things with me have been going along pretty well lately. I'm focusing a lot of my work lately has been on compliance reviews, so performing the FinCEN review or applying for these either state, the state money transmission licenses, doing the New York license application at the moment. So that's where I've been spending most of my time, and then on the weekends, attending some excellent trading courses offered at Block Spaces, hosted taught by Tone Bays. So that was a lot of fun last weekend.
Yeah, thanks for attending my trading course. Did you get a lot out of it? Are you going to change professions now from a lawyer to a trader?
Well, the good thing about crypto is you can trade at night.
And hey, thanks for coming out to eat some steaks with us as well.
Oh, yeah. You ate the biggest steak I've ever seen anyone consume. You said Jimmy eats bigger ones, but that was quite the thing to watch.
I'm working my way up to Jimmy. All right. Let's go ahead and kick the show off. Hopefully, like I said, a few more will join us as we come. as usual, I have to promote the conference that I am organizing. It's going to be in Las Vegas, January 24 to 26. I know you're coming, Sasha, and you're going to play in the poker tournament as well, right?
Maybe. I'll definitely be there.
Yeah, you got to start studying. David Silver is supposed to come and play. I know, unfortunately, Bill, you can't make it. Manny, what do you think? You got to make it out to Vegas, 24 to 26? Oh, you're muted, Manny.
I hope I can make it. Yeah, should be fun.
All right. Cool. Yeah, I don't. If a bunch of you guys come, I mean, we can always do a law panel. I haven't really put the agenda together yet. And of course, the carnivory dinner and the poker game. Let me know if you want to play in the poker game. Got room for some celebrities. All right, enough of that. Let's jump right into it. We got so many topics. We got so many topics that we're supposed to cover a month ago. I kept them all on the agenda. I'm so happy I'm going to close the tabs. We're going to begin with the SEC. So I'm going to play the following clip. Hopefully the sound comes through good. And this was the SEC chairman speaking about the ICOs.
You had a settlement with 2 ICO issuers as well as another exchange for not registering with the SEC. What's the message here, and what about the people who currently own ICOs? What's the value of their ICOs if they're dealing with a not registered security at this point?
Well, Bob, let's separate securities from non-securities. I think we've been clear that we don't believe Bitcoin is a security, but many of the ICOs that you see and you talk about, they are securities. And if you're going to offer and sell securities, you have to do so in compliance with our laws. I think we've been clear about that. The recent actions further emphasize that our securities laws do apply to the ICO space. If people are going to raise money using initial coin offerings, they either have to do so in a private placement or they have to register with the SEC. And when you register with the SEC, you got to provide financial statements and disclosure along the lines that we would expect.
So are all ICOs essentially in non-compliance? I know there could be some narrow windows where they might not necessarily be so, but you seem to be saying they're all in non-compliance right now. That seems to be the message.
We've had no ICOs registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. To the extent an ICO has been conducted offshore or pursuant to a private placement exemption, fine. To the extent that you've conducted a public offering in an ICO, it's non-compliant.
Let me just move on. The Bitcoin ETF, we've been waiting for a long time for some.
Well, the ETF discussion will have to wait till our financial show. So speaking of the SEC, so this video was published on November 26th. A few days before that, on November 16th, the SEC released an official statement. I'm sure all of you guys have read it multiple times. And it talked about 3 specific things: offers and sales of digital asset securities, which is what I want to cover on this show today. I want to save the conversation about investment vehicles, investing in digital asset securities. But I guess this is like pooling money together and investing on behalf of others. We can save the discussion for another day. And unfortunately, and I really want to talk about this, the trading of those digital assets. And again, that's going to be a discussion for another day. So let's just stick to the ICO stuff. I'm just going to go through the headlines and I'll let you guys comment on whatever you see fit. And this is what happens when we don't do a show in 2 months. So the SEC had 2 settlements, or they fined 2 companies. It was 2 big ones. It was AirFox. This is a headline from November 19th. Again, we're covering all this stuff in November. So AirFox and Paragon. So these were the 2 that the SEC had found to be totally non-compliant, and they already went after them. In Colorado, the Securities Commission in Colorado filed 20 cases against fraudulent ICOs. Now, I did a Control F here on Salt, and I didn't see it here because Salt just happens to be out of Colorado, because Salt ended up in a lot of hot water. I want to talk some specifics about this, but before we talk specifics about Salt and perhaps the Binance token, let's talk about the general terms. What's going on? What's the latest? Bill, let's start with you.
So these 2 enforcement actions were really interesting, and I think the if you have, Tone, that press release that the SEC put out that you were just referring to, scroll down a little bit to the end of the first section. There's one section in there that I think is the most interesting, right? So I think we've got it says something about a path to compliance.
Let me read it. Let me read it because we have an audio podcast as well.
Sure.
The Commission's recent enforcement actions involving AirFox, Paragon, Crypto Asset Management, Token Lot, and Ether Delta, discussed further below, illustrate the importance of complying with these requirements. Broadly speaking, the issues raised in these actions fall into three categories: initial offers and sales of digital asset securities, including those issued in initial coin offerings. Number two, investment vehicles. And but that's basically what this thing is about. Oh, I'm sorry.
So that was a great summary, but it's the next sentence at the bottom, right where it says these two. Yeah, you just had it highlighted.
This is what you want to read. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I was reading the introduction, last paragraph. These two matters demonstrate that there is a path to compliance with the federal securities laws going forward, even where issuers have conducted an illegal, unregistered offering of digital asset securities. You know what? This makes me really pissed. I didn't do a Tone Vase ICO. Now that I read that sentence. What the hell?
Essentially what they did is they said, look, for these two particular ICOs, they had to offer rescission to the investors, which rescission is a legal term, which means you unwind the transaction and it makes it as though it never occurred. So the issuers had to provide notice to everybody who invested and said, hey, do you want to keep your tokens or do you want to get your initial contributed funds back? That was the rescission component. Then they had to register with the SEC. When it's a public offering and you register a public offering with the SEC, usually you file something called a Form S1. Form S1 has, well, frankly, a ton of crap on it about the offering, the issuers, the use of proceeds, financial statements, whether people were involved in any kind of criminal misconduct, lawsuits. I mean, I could keep going. There's a whole host. So the SEC said, look, you have to disclose this information to the people, and you have to do it in the context of the rescission offer, because this is going to help people decide whether they want to rescind or not. And then the SEC finally said that they have to file regular reports with the SEC, which I think is a little bit, I don't know, it might be a square peg in a round tube. You know, if you're depending on the type of ICO token that you're talking about, quarterly or annual reports might not be very helpful. But that's the big, for me, that's the big takeaway from these SEC orders, is that they're trying to find a way for ICO tokens and ICO projects not to be left in legal limbo, but a way to sanitize after the fact these projects. And I think that that's probably a good thing. We don't want legal purgatory.
Manny, anything to add on that?
Yeah, no, I I agree with those comments. I mean, I think what I got out of these are, you know, these enforcement actions, there was really nothing surprising to me. It seems like the enforcement actions that come out of the SEC, for the most part, seem to be relatively straightforward, like easier kind of cases for them to prove, where, you know, there was an offering, they could rely upon, you know, how we demonstrate that was an offering and there was no registration, right, or exemption therefrom. So I don't see these, you know, and absent the comments that were mentioned, I don't see these enforcement actions as really enlightening in any way. What I want to mention was I was at Consensus in New York in November, and there was a fireside with SEC Chair Clayton. And he actually, what I thought was interesting, you know, it was a very candid conversation. He was interviewed by Glenn Hutchins. And it was probably one of the most open conversations that I've seen him have. And he pretty much said, look, you know, when he looks at an ICO, more or less, he's looking at it as it's a registered, some type of registered offering or exempt from registration. And then what he does is he determines characteristics that would not make it a registered offering or exempt from registration. meaning that is perspective is this is some type of securities offering, right? And then consider where do you go from there. So I just thought that was an interesting perspective, that kind of going back to comments he made earlier in the year that I, at the time, were deemed somewhat controversial, that, you know, he hasn't seen an ICO that was security. He kind of reiterated that to me in a way by kind of saying that his lens and perspective when he looks at ICOs, they're offerings.
You said that he hasn't seen an ICO that wasn't a security.
That wasn't a security, sorry. Yeah, that wasn't a security. But so his comments at Consensus were along those lines, that he views things from the perspective of an offering being a security, which I thought was interesting in terms of trying to understand the regulator's perspective and the framework and the mindset of a regulator. And then how would something not be security in terms of securities offering? Well, you know, it has to deviate from what would make it a security. So does ambiguity still exist to a large extent? But at the same time, I thought it was telling that he portrayed his point of view and how he views things. I thought that was telling from my perspective.
All right, I got a few more specific questions for you guys, but Sasha, general thoughts on the current securities law applied to ICOs?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tone. I thought this was interesting when it came out, and I thought more companies would, well, I wasn't sure, I guess, what would happen, but it seemed like a direct message from the SEC to anyone that did an unregistered securities offering, thinking they were doing an ICO and that the securities laws didn't apply to them, would have a clear path of what to do. But it's not a very desirable path for any company that's in that boat. And it was interesting watching the tweets of the Paragon CEO. She was saying, like, she was so proud of her company for getting to this outcome. And it was ridiculous watching these string of tweets saying how proud she was that, they got fined 250 grand and have to give back all their money and have to register, which is not a cheap process, as Bill, alluded to, with that long form that they have to fill out. And they have to publicly, this should be an embarrassment to them, not something to be very proud of. But anyway, everyone's right that it does give some clarity of what a company can do. It's just it's financially incentivized that unless you're under extreme pressure from the SEC, that this is not something you're probably going to want to do for your ICO. And a lot of them probably don't still have the money left to refund people. So that would be interesting to see. I've seen a few reports that show certain wallets showing what money is left from ICO projects. But, to do these filings with the SEC, they have to disclose extensive financial information and the bad actors checks. And I don't think it's very practical for these companies to follow these steps. But
yeah, well, thanks for mentioning. Actually, I forgot to take my hat off when the show started. Love it.
A new tone base.
Yeah. So Sasha, you alluded to it, right? So what happens when 80% of all these ICOs don't have the money to refund initial investments? Now what?
We'll see what happens. I'm sure that, it's going to come down to that. And I think they'll just, what can you do? You can't get you can't get, water out of a rock or blood out of a rock. Like, if the money's gone on frivolous expenses, I don't know, does Bill or Manny, do you know how they're going to handle that? Like, do they put loans, attach things to people's real estate, and then if they sell it 10 years later, they have to pay back the SEC, and then the SEC will give it to investors? Or how will they handle that?
Well, there is personal liability. I mean, we've seen enforcement actions that have SEC penalties that go beyond what was recouped. So there, if a project blows it all on hookers and blow, I guess you could say, they should be concerned about potential liability for that. And it is a difficult proposition because sometimes you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily get you out of jail free because you say, "Oops, we don't have the money. I can't return it." There are mechanisms to collect and to enforce collection in terms of obligations owed. I mean, somebody benefited from the proceeds of the ICO, and it's easily traceable.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of that personal liability. I'm going to move on. So we've heard unofficially people say, well, we think Ethereum was a security, but now it's not. Are they going to have to return the $5 million back to initial investors? And how do you prove you were an official investor in Ethereum? Because it was those damn I think it was JSON files that some people that got, and they lost their passwords too, and then Vitalik wouldn't give them a new password even though he emailed it to some people. Like, that's a whole giant mess. Like, I would love to see, I want this to apply evenly across the board. Ethereum was an ICO. Does anybody here think they're gonna have to give people the option to return investor money? Now, I know the initial price of Ethereum was 20 cents a token. So I really want the SEC to wait until Ethereum is below 20 cents a token, which is where it's going, and then force this action upon Ethereum. What do you guys think of that one?
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the offer of rescission. There's a lot of mechanics about how all this works that I think we're all left scratching our heads. But I think that all we can do is go from the SEC's guidance, right? If they say they're not going to pursue an enforcement action if you do A, B, and C, then I think that it behooves founders to do A, B, and C if they can, and if not, then they, it's like worrying if you've got a mob hit over your head. How are you going to sleep at night, right? If these types of remedial measures can be accomplished, they probably should be accomplished.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, you're raising great points about Ethereum, but notice, in all of the speeches, and the Hinman speech in particular, where they bring up, transmogrification, that, you could have a security token or offering that turns into a utility. They preface it by saying, Bitcoin is not a security, and absent the offering of Ethereum, Ethereum is not a security. So they're kind of punting on that whole premise of how Ethereum came to the market. And I think, this confusion about now, something that came out clearly as a security offering could transform into utility, I think makes matters even more confusing. But with that being said, I think it could be a way for the commission and the regulators to justify not moving forward in bringing action against Ethereum. It's a very unique position. It's a very unique position. And I think I'm only hearing it apply to Ethereum. And everything I hear about Ethereum, like I said, is not speaking about how Ethereum came to the market, but Ethereum today. So it's kind of like they're punting on a whole offering and how Ethereum came to the market.
But they punted it off to the CFTC. But did you see the CFTC recently put out a request for comments? And if all those comments come back that it is actually centralized and not a network that is comparable to Bitcoin and the things that make Bitcoin not a security, I wonder what will happen there. But I think Ethereum has enough promoters that they're going to get a lot of people writing positive stuff about it. So I can't wait to see what all those comments come out like.
Yeah, I really don't have the time to put it all in, but hey, I got a lot of people watching. We have 800 people watching this show. This is definitely our new record. And hey, you guys know I have 3 Ethereum crypto scam episodes. You guys have heard everything I have to say about Ethereum. So please let the CFTC know that it's insane. And the other thing, we're going to move on to the next topic, but it's not just that part. And you're right. Everyone seems to want to forget and brush it under the rug, the fact that Ethereum was an ICO. And even if they say, well, it's no longer, other than, that initial coin offering, but somebody did that initial coin offering. So at some point it was completely centralized. So I still think that those people that did the initial coin offering are responsible for launching an uncompliant security. And Jason Siebert and I talked about this at length on the very first crypto scam episode of Ethereum, like almost 2 years ago now. And it's amazing how no one is still discussing it other than, me, basically. All right, but let's move on. Let's talk about one specific case, and that's the Salt case. So Salt came under fire, the CCM. By the way, all of these articles are in the video description, guys. So Salt got a subpoena from the SEC about their $50 million token sale that took place at the end of November. Now, you guys feel free to put your comments on the whole Salt issue. Now, Salt is a totally useless token. You don't need to create your own currency in order to give out loans. I mean, this is totally ridiculous. This is not decentralized, it's a totally centralized project. Now, the interesting thing here is that Eric Voorhees was quasi-involved with the Salt company. And as the article points out, he might have been in violation of his 2014 settlement with the SEC over the whole Satoshi Dice situation. And here's the SEC's press release from 2014, where Eric Voorhees was fined for I guess, misfiling paperwork on securities when he sold Satoshi Dice. You guys can go ahead and read that over. And CoinDesk also talked about this story as well. And like I said, all of these links are in the video descriptions. Have you guys looked into this, the whole Salt and Eric Voorhees situation and what's going on there? And how bad is it if he is found to have violated a prior SEC settlement that he had?
So I think just on a macro level, this sort of fits into everything else we've been talking about. This isn't a surprise that this is another ICO that the SEC thinks was a security. One of the interesting things about it that you pointed out with his prior settlement is that if you were going to do an offering with if you were someone that the SEC considers to be, quote unquote, a bad actor, and you had been involved in a certain enumerated list of criminal activities, one would be something that was dealt with dishonesty, embezzlement, fraud. Another one is an SEC enforcement order. There's a list of other ones I don't have off the top of my head. But if you qualify for one of these types of prior conduct that makes you a bad actor, you're not allowed to be an executive, a board member, a major shareholder for a company that does an offering. So this, I think, compounds the problems. I don't like to comment on anyone's individual. I don't want to paint Mr. Voorhees in any particular light, but the issue compounds the reasons why a registration is important. So either he would have been prohibited from being a part of the project, or if it was a certain time in the past, and I think the date is before 2013, or I think another section of the Securities Act says 10 years, you'd have to disclose the shit out of it, basically. You have to go into all the details of what the bad actor conduct really happened to be. So it's an interesting twist. And I think this is just one of the additional reasons why, raising any kind of a fundraiser is a trap for the unwary. And if you're raising funds from third parties and keeping that either for yourself or using that in some sort of an enterprise with an expectation of profits, you need to have legal counsel, basically, to make sure stuff like this doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, that you made a good point. Like, had they registered with the SEC, the SEC probably could have told them, hey, Eric Voorhees can't be involved.
He would have been prohibited from being involved. Absolutely.
Oh man, I'm just seeing how bad they nailed him. Jesus. Voorhees agreed to settle the SEC's charges by paying full disgorgement of the 15.8 oh wait, that's thousand. I thought that was million. Oh, it's not that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Only 15,000. I thought it was 15 million. All right, 15,000 still sucks, but at least not 15 million. And in profit, plus $35,000 penalty for a total of $50,000. I mean, was that really his profit? Only 15,000 on Satoshi Dice? That seems kind of small, but I thought it was worth a lot more than that.
I think he gave a lot, like he raised something like 5,000 Bitcoins and then returned 4,500 of them to the people that that had initially contributed. So there was something like that happened. I don't think he was a necessarily bad actor during that. Well, that explains it why he only had 15 grand profit, I guess.
All right. Well, again, we're not here to talk about any specific person. Any general comments on this before we move on, Manny or Sasha?
Well, just quickly, the articles about him that came out, they had to redact parts of it because they were calling him the CEO, but it says he was on the board, but then he stepped down from the board. So who knows? If you scroll to the bottom, they say
he was never the CEO. I could have told him that.
One of them reported it.
Yeah, he was like half consultant and a board member. I mean, he wasn't like directly. He didn't have a C position there, but he was involved.
But did he get out before the ICO? I guess would be the question. And if they thought that their ICO wasn't a security when they were doing it, then that they should have taken the steps to obtain a counsel that would say that it was a security and that he couldn't be on it. But at the time they were doing it, it was before a lot of these, like the Dow notice had come out and Munchie had come out, but a lot of companies, I think, still thought that there was such thing as a utility token, and it wasn't until later in the year that the attitude really shifted away from that. And then even the patent thing that he's listed on, the date that they listed it was in the summer of 2018, and then they filed it in January. But that article is saying, oh, he was still involved in the company in January. But if you look at the date that they initially did it was August 2nd, 2018.
Yeah, gotcha. And hey, Brian Klein, I probably is like the busiest man in blockchain these days. Is there anyone he's not a defense attorney for?
Mm-hmm. No Did you see his tweet about Eric Voorhees? He said something like, "I'm really proud to represent him. He's a visionary. He's abided by his SEC settlements. The Wall Street story was unfair."
Man, yeah. Brian Klein was on the first panel I ever moderated. Brian Klein was on that panel. So that was back to like 2014 or something like that. Wow.
These cases, I mean, they just reek of the need for competent counsel and kind of doing due diligence, right? I mean, to have someone who's barred, affiliated with a project in any way, it's extremely troublesome. And if some type a minimal analysis was done, we came up with that determination. So the potential enforcement action on ICO is what it is, but the fact that someone involved, the Voorhees was involved, which it looks like he was, during his bar, I mean, that makes it that much more troublesome.
Yeah, I was really hoping we would get David Silver for this because he was like the first guy quoted in this whole ICO thing. Like here's that Bloomberg article with SEC going after ICOs, and here he is. There's global crackdown coming. David Silver. Government wasn't going to be intimidated by a bunch of libertarians and anarchists in the next year or two. We'll see more than just enforcement actions. Yeah, well, we'll get Silver back on the show, or he will definitely be in Vegas, so definitely come out.
That's weird. I thought he was a libertarian. I'm only kidding.
Oh, Silver? Yeah, sure. All right, so let's move on. This is a story that hit the headlines. So a judge, all right, why is this taking so long to load? So a judge had ruled that a specific ICO is not a security, said that the SEC was not able to justify it being a security. I don't really pay for subscriptions to law stuff. Maybe I should since I'm doing a law show now. But again, I'm sure you guys had seen it. Now, before I have you comment, now Marco Santori was one of the first to comment. very proud of this. And remember, Marco Santori, he was the initiator of SAFT. What does that stand for? The secure...
Simple Agreement for Future Tokens.
Simple Agreement for Future Tokens. Thank you so much. And that's right. That's what it was. So he says a federal court in California just ruled against the SEC in an ICO case, explaining that the plaintiff will now have to prove for an ICO to be a security. If you care about whether ICOs create securities, read on. So he's obviously in favor of this. Our own Drew Hinkus, who has not been on the show in a while, unfortunately, had something slightly different to say. Many are excited to see the judge order that block vest instrument is not a security. Looks good, but maybe let's not start planning parades quite yet. And these were his thoughts. I'm sure you guys read them all, even though it was a while ago. It was 20 days ago now. So any what happened there? What did the judge actually say? Is this going to get bumped to a higher court? Like, how critical is this ruling? Please educate the general public. We'll start with, how about Manny? How about we start with you?
I tend to fall into the opinion of agreeing with Drew. I think it might be too early to have a parade and a celebration because we're talking about a preliminary injunction, so it's not one of these to kind of generalize it. It's not something very specific to the SEC determining whether an ICO is a security or not. It was specific action requesting the court grant an injunction. So I think it's too early to kind of celebrate. It is interesting though, because I know people follow particularly when the SEC is not successful. So for the people who the nerds who follow that stuff, it is very interesting. When courts rule against the SEC, but I'm not sure. Going back to what we were mentioning earlier with regard to clarity of what are the elements or indicia that make an ICO a security, or what are the elements or indicia that make it not a security. I'm not sure if we get any of that from this. I'm thinking this is more of I'm looking at it from the perspective of it's an injunction, and I'm not gonna read too much into this beyond that.
All right, Sasha, let's go over to you.
Thanks, Tone. Yeah, this case was interesting. Like everything that came off Twitter, when I first looked at it, I was thinking it said something different, like that the SEC actually lost the case and that this wasn't determined as security. And then when you read into it, it's, this is just a preliminary injunction, and the injunction is a very hard standard to meet. Like the SEC has to show that the person has previously violated the securities laws and that there's a reasonable likelihood that the wrong will continue to be repeated. And if you look into the facts here, the guy, Mr. Ringwald, he put $175,000 of his own capital into the company, and one of his staff members put a significant amount in as well. And all he has left is $40,000. So the SEC had his $40,000 locked up in a temporary injunction, and he was unable to feed his family. And that's why, I think that's part of why they were so adamant in saying that they don't need to keep this injunction going. I don't know if that's, to me, that looks like why they just didn't want the guy starving to death, or his family. And there's also a big question around what the investment was for. So he says that only $10,000 worth of cryptocurrency was raised in the project, even though they listed on their website that $2.5 million had been raised. They're saying in factual response to the SEC now that only 10,000 was raised, and it was from 32 people who were testing their website, and that they weren't buying it for the expectation of profits. They didn't even risk their capital, which is what Marco's talking about here, because they thought they were just using it as a test net. So the court went to pretty great lengths to establish that this isn't necessarily, they have to show whether The SEC doesn't have jurisdiction if this ICO is not a security. If these 32 people did not expect profits and did not risk their capital, then it wouldn't qualify as an investment contract. Therefore, it's hard to prove. There's so many funny facts in this case, though, that the website said they raised $2.5 million. They said they had SEC and CFTC and the BES's approval. The BES is a made-up organization called the Blockchain Exchange Commission. So these people are liars. They're big time. They're probably is going to, as the case unfolds, it's probably going to come to light that they're lying about stuff. And the SEC is saying that they did raise, there's enough transactions, blockchain transactions, to show they raised more than $10,000. But until that information is actually tested, there's not enough here to lock up the guy's $40,000 that he has left that he needs for his living expenses. So,
but wait a minute. So the guy who had his last $40,000 locked up, was he one of the creators of this thing, or he was just one of the investors? No,
he's the creator. Mm-hmm. Ringwald. Yeah.
Wow. So before we go over to Bill, you raise another interesting point. I'm going to forget my train of thoughts. I want to throw it out there. Like, what happens when you only raise $20,000, $30,000, but you start blabbing all over your website and the Twitter that you've raised millions of dollars in order to generate interest in your, fake company in order to pump those tokens later? Like, where's the liability there? Because now you can say, hey, SEC, I really only made $10,000. I can give it back to you. No harm, no foul. What happens to the lying in order to, pump your project? Like what kind of liability there is for that in this? Well, clearly no one cares in this space, but in general.
Once it would be determined that this is a security or any similar project was a security, which they have to be, this is the first time anyone's fighting back on the SEC on this. So now they have to actually determine that it's a security by going through and making the analysis. This initial analysis doesn't really mean anything. It just means they can't have the injunction. If it's a security, then the securities laws apply, and you can't make fraudulent misstatements to the public, and that's certainly something that can be punished for making those statements.
Well, again, I don't know many of the details, but the thing really stinks to high heavens, right? Because like the guy is claiming that all he has is $40,000 left to feed his family, yet he somehow has the money to pay for a lawyer to fight the SEC.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things they alleged was he didn't have any money to pay his lawyers. And that's part of why they probably didn't issue the injunction, so that he can pay them. I think was my take anyway.
But I mean, think even the Tomahawk case, right? I mean, they didn't sell any tokens, right? That's an interesting case by comparison, right? Where they didn't sell any. So it doesn't really even matter how many tokens are sold or not. It's if you're offering these ICO that are deemed securities in terms of, either registered or an exemption from registration, that's really the fundamental point. So, I don't even think that matters in terms of how many tokens are sold or not. I think, I agree with Sasha's comments. I mean, this is, it's kind of early days to kind of look at this case more than I think, really should be. It should be taken somewhat superficially because it's talking about a preliminary injunction. And I think what's interesting about it is this is the first time that there's been resistance. The other matters that we liken to refer to all the time in terms of the enforcement actions, there wasn't much disagreement. So there was consent from those individuals and those projects, and they agreed with those enforcement actions, and they were closed out. But this is what unique time where there's some dispute about the fundamental question. But to look at this more than than what we're saying, I think is kind of jumping the gun.
Bill, quick thoughts. I know Manny has to go in about 10 minutes. I want to get him for at least one more topic. We can always come back here if there's something really important you want to dive into.
No, I don't. Actually, this is a case I don't care to go into too much detail. I thought there was a lot of really good comments. But, let's just look at this as a matter of civil procedure. In this case, it might have been criminal procedure. So an injunction is something that happens before trial in a lawsuit, and it usually, you know, if either the SEC wants to put pressure on someone, or if I'm in a civil lawsuit, let's say, and I want to put pressure on someone, you can go in and you can say, I want the court to assume that I'm going to win and order the court to freeze all the assets so that none of the proceeds of whatever bad conduct can be dissipated, right? But if you're going to make that move, you have to essentially prove your case at the beginning of your case and not the end of your case. And it's usually before you get discovery. It's before you get a lot of different things. So it's a very high bar, and it compresses an entire lawsuit from, you know, a year, maybe 2 years, into 2 weeks. And it's something that, as everybody said, this isn't additional information, but it's, you know, it's hard to do. I will say this, Judge Curiel, I believe he's in the Southern District of New York, is a very well-respected judge all over the country. So his opinions will probably be, in this case, as it goes forward, will probably be taken with some, I don't want to say a grain of salt. What's the opposite of that? With some respect.
All right, very good.
Gravity
with some gravity. That's right.
Nice. All right, so I guess our last topic in security law, and before we move on, and maybe we'll save it for next time because I know I'm missing Jason and some of the other guys that are dealing with securities. We're going to be coming back to Binance quite a bit. So Larry Cermak, he is a lawyer, right? Yes. So Larry Cermak wrote an article. I think he likes Binance a little too much. It makes me question how much of the Binance token he actually has. And he wrote this.
And he has no coins. He published something recently saying he has, like, everyone at the block had to show how much coins they have, how many.
I know, but like, I don't believe anybody in this space. Like, how do you know who doesn't have any coins?
Yeah, good point.
So he wrote this huge piece about Binance, and then he had this gigantic tweet storm about Binance, praising them again to high heavens, except everyone seems to ignore his piece number 3. Binance raised $15 million in an ICO in July 2017. And within 6 months had become the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world. I wonder why. When you print your own money and you sell that money for $15 million, you have a huge edge on all of your competition of other exchanges that decided not to print or sell uncompliant securities. It's been the largest crypto exchange by volume. Probably, maybe, I don't know. I don't trust any of the volume of these Chinese companies. Now, of course, they're not actually in China. China banned all ICOs, so they weren't going to do it out of China. I believe they've already moved like 2 times, and I think they're in Malta now. I think they were somewhere else before that. So he mentions that, and then he goes on about how great they are and all this other stuff. But what about this? Like, can someone like tell me what that? Because clearly a bunch of U.S. citizens bought this stuff. They're all trading on it. They're all praising it. And they're like, you need the Binance token. We get cheaper fees with the Binance token. No, that just means they're ripping off the people that aren't buying into their printed money. Like, I'm sorry, like, am I the only one that finds this ridiculous? Anyone? I guess Manny's got to go soon. Manny, let's start with you here.
I think he put in the Telegram chat he can't comment on this one.
Oh, Manny can't comment on this one. Sorry, I didn't see the Telegram chat. I was using the other one. Okay, Sasha, you go.
Well, I guess I should disclose I have some Binance tokens, and I don't know, 15 million doesn't seem like that big of an ICO compared to some of the other ICOs we saw out there. So I kind of lean towards they use their money to build something that seems to work, hasn't been hacked, has some integrity for the coins they're listing. Like that chart that Larry put in the Twitter thing produced by Dyer shows the losses on Binance coins on average compared to the rest of the market are lower. And that could be because they only list 158 that they have a pretty stringent process on. But But the jurisdiction hopping definitely will make it hard for the SEC to, to go after them on something like their unregistered security sale. Like, I do think that's probably what it would boil down to if it did have to come to the test. But then there's also, and our next story kind of gets into the Tether thing, but now Binance Binance holds a lot of Tether, and there's a lot of risk that Tether is not worth what they say it's worth. And Binance is now creating a basket of stable coins. And maybe they're doing that, to get rid of their own bags of Tether. So that would be kind of, anyway, it'll just be, I'm just sitting on the sidelines watching this play out.
Bill, very quick thoughts, because I want to get Manny's views on the Tether story. Hopefully everyone's able to comment on that one.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot of knowledge of this one, Tone. I will say this though, and I haven't used Binance personally. I tend to like my exchanges to be in a country that I am in, simply for the reason that if anything goes wrong, I can try to hold them accountable. So, that's my personal preference. I think that generally we need to be very suspect of exchanges and their economics and how they work generally. And this isn't specific to Binance. You've heard me say this over and over again. Unless it's very clearly disclosed how the exchange is making their money and whether they have, for example, their own proprietary bots or they're taking the other side of a trade to their investors participating on their exchange, there's a tremendous amount of room for, I guess you could call it skimming. And everyone needs to be very careful about that to the extent they want to capture the economic opportunity of their trades. If you don't, then, use whatever exchange you want to use.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about the story in the upcoming episodes, because everyone is in the chat is like saying that the SEC, it's none of the SEC's business what Binance is doing. They're not in SEC's jurisdiction. They're in a European Union country. Americans, citizens are speculating on their token. I don't understand how people in the live chat think that the SEC has absolutely no jurisdiction here.
Yeah, they would.
Let's talk about what the SEC's jurisdiction is, right? There's an issue of how far outside the United States the U.S. securities laws can go. And so there's a test called the extraterritoriality test, which means that the U.S. has jurisdiction if title passes to a security in the U.S., or if irrevocable liability for a security was taken within the U.S. And that could be, for example, you saw in the Tezos case, this was really the first one where we had a court decision relating to this issue. The judge said, well, for example, you had a U.S.-based IP address that contributions went through. That was in the U.S. Transactions get recorded on a Bitcoin, Ethereum blockchain in the U.S. So arguably, title passes in the U.S. So there's different ways that courts and regulators are determining, how you can attach U.S. jurisdiction to these things. But generally speaking, you could have a court case with against some person or entity outside the U.S. But what are you really going to do unless they step foot in U.S. soil, or you can get Interpol on them? It's like how Comey is bringing indictments against the Russians in New York City. Like,
well, okay. No, but this is very different, right? I mean, if he launched it in Russia or if he launched it in China, I would absolutely agree with the commenters, right? That yes, U.S. SEC has no jurisdiction in Russia or China; they can't go in there. But come on, but the SEC equivalent out of Europe aren't talking to the SEC right now about how to manage this stuff. They're going to be on the same page.
Maybe. I can't speak to that.
Well, at least that's my opinion, I guess. All right, let's move on to the last topic. Hopefully, we have Manny for a few more minutes. And this is the Ripple situation. So US officials are probing Tether's role in Bitcoin's market manipulation. So I'm not going to get into the details of the article, but basically it looks like the US government is going after Tether and Bitfinex, accusing them of the price manipulation. Now, I personally think this is ridiculous. This is the kind of stuff they should have done 2 years ago, not like in the aftermath of the drop. I personally don't blame Ripple for the rise, and I don't blame Ripple for the fall. Yeah, I didn't want Ripple to exist to begin with, and this is the kind of stuff that needs to be done ahead of time, in my financial opinion. But what do you guys think from a legal perspective about the whole Ripple, Bitfinex, and Tether being blamed for price manipulation? Manny, I'll start with you since you have to go.
Sure. Yeah, I think this is really interesting. I mean, right, we all know about Tether and, the issues around Tether, and what was going on in terms of, was it truly backed by USD? How was that maintained and all that, right? So, there's just questions that unfortunately still remain. I think, to me, what I read into this is going to, in my opinion, have an effect upon the SEC approval or not approving the Bitcoin ETFs, right? Because the argument with the SEC is that Bitcoin is subject to manipulation, in that you can't surveil the Bitcoin marketplace the way we surveil other marketplaces to stave off, prevent manipulation. And I think, even though it kind of seems kind of somewhat far-fetched and out there potentially, it just drives into that fundamental point. And, in that video that you showed when you started off the show with Chair Clayton, later on that video, he talks about the Bitcoin ETF and the fact that the SEC is still uncomfortable wrapping their arms around the fact that an exchange could effectively surveil for Bitcoin, preventing manipulation. So I think this just drives that point even further, and I think hurts the prospects of the Bitcoin ETF, being approved.
All right. Hey, hold on. I gotta stop screen share for a second. Let's say hi to Adela. Hey, Adela. Oh, you have to unmute.
And I'm gonna drop, guys.
Great. You're gonna drop out, Manny. Hey, Manny.
Bye, Manny.
We'll catch you on the next one.
Happy holidays, everybody. See ya.
I can unmute you, Adela.
Oh, crap.
There you go. You're unmuted.
Oh, shit. I just missed Manny. I didn't even get time to make fun of him for his, microphone. That sucks.
No, it's okay. You can make fun of me for my new haircut or lack thereof.
I love it. This is basically what I call the, I am not going to pretend anymore hairstyle. I'm not accepting reality. I love it.
No, I wasn't pretending. Okay, here's the thing. Here's the truth, right? So the truth is, I thought I had a terrible shaved head for a shaved head, and it turns out the complete opposite. I really, why didn't all of you guys complain about my hair for the last couple of years? I would have done this earlier.
It's like Trump's hair. It's like a thing,
It was your signature move, man.
I know.
That's in your ICO with his hair now, with his lack of hair. It's like you're not real chilling,
All right. Let's move on with the show. Adela, you've been watching. We'll get let's finish up this story, and then maybe I'll grab your comments on our earlier stories. It depends on Bill and Sasha how much time they have. You guys both know I can do this all day. Oh wow, look who else is coming in. Oh boy. Oh my
God, is it Jason?
No, unfortunately, it's not.
Oh, no,
it's someone way better looking. Oh, you're muted, David. You're muted, David. There you go.
Oh my God. With his beard, no hair, oh my God. Restus has more hair than me.
Hey, Dave, is your makeup artist off today, or what's going on?
Oh, I have to, I guess we're embarrassed myself. I have my first zit of my life. I haven't had the zit since I was in high school.
All right, guys. Hey, how we doing on time? Sasha, Bill, you guys have any commitments? What do you guys have? I'm ready to go 1 more hour at most. You guys have commitments so that I know how to manage this.
I think another half hour is good for me.
All right.
I'm just here for a cameo. I have guests and my mom's here trying to make a rum cake in the kitchen. It's pretty serious.
All right. So Adela, so let's go to you then. Hey, you've been listening to us up to this point.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say on any of the stories? The floor is yours.
Yeah. So actually, I was wondering about Binance. I know I don't want to go back because we have a lot of things to cover, but
No. I want you to comment on anything that we've said prior up to this point. So Binance is fine.
Like anything?
Yes, just floor is yours. Go.
Okay. So I was thinking about Binance because I was wondering. I looked on the FinCEN MSB registrants portal, and I don't see that they're registered in the US as an MSB, which is a little odd, Do you guys know if they're registered or not? I know I don't have all of the information, whether they're, what they registered as, because for example, you can use different search things in the search fields. So they could have a different DBA that they use to register. I don't know. Does anybody know?
Are you talking about Binance the company, or are you talking about what classified their token as?
Oh no, I don't care about their token. I'm gonna just watch the whole thing unfold as it goes. But I was wondering whether they were registered MSB in the US.
They're not, and they're allowing 2 Bitcoin a day to move without requiring KYC, but they're saying that they are complying with to report suspicious transactions and stuff without registering. So I have no idea how that really works, but that's their story.
Lies, everybody's lying.
As you know, I'm the biggest libertarian ever, right? I always try to, talk about how libertarian I am, but it just seems like what is the risk? What do you, Sasha, for example, how risky do you think it is for them to continue, operating practically in the US? Because for, I don't know, what is it? $1.99, $2.99 a month, you can, get a VPN and use their services anyways, right? Like, do you think it's all worth the risk? They call themselves the largest exchange in the world, and I wonder what they're using to base that on, if it's volume or what, I don't know.
It's probably trade volume. I want to throw one more at you, Adela. So you're talking about the money services license with registering with FinCEN on withdrawing value from the exchange. What about the whole Tether competitor, True USD, which is supposed to have actual US dollars, American money, backing this stable coin? How is that any different than actually moving US dollars?
I don't think it practically is.
Like, if anything, I would think that would need a money services license.
I don't think it's practically different, Does anybody else?
Well, someone did an interesting thing about how to arbitrage the price difference of Bitcoin today from Coinbase to Kraken. No, from Coinbase to Bittrex to Binance to Kraken into Tether, and then get your money out. Where if you did that, you would make like a guaranteed $6 and not have to go through like KYC to get your money out.
Wait, so you're actually getting paid to get your money out without KYC? I love it.
And it was on Twitter today. Someone had like this great flow about how you can arbitrage, because I want to say like there was a difference of by like $100 or $110 the price of Bitcoin on Coinbase and Binance, and then apparently Tether was up a little bit today also. So I'm with you, Adela. But I'll say this: I don't think they're anything to do with the U.S. because I can't sue them, and if I could sue them, I would.
You'll find a way, David. I believe in you.
Me too. But my problem with what he talks about, and I'm blanking on the CEO's name, when they left Japan to go to Malta, everyone that leaves Japan to go to Malta, they're not going to stay in the U.S. And obviously, people know how I feel about certain other exchanges. So anyone, if you can't meet the regulatory structure in Japan, you're never going to meet the regulatory structure in the U.S. So no, I don't think he's coming here, and I think he's staying out. And I think what Sasha said was dead on accurate. They're not exactly complying with KYC at the moment.
But it's not hard, We're certainly doing it at local Bitcoins, right? Well, I wouldn't call it hard. I would call it tedious, to register and to get the state-by-state licensure. So I'm just wondering, for the largest exchange in the world, why they wouldn't just bother to do it.
Again, my biggest problem with them, again, look, I hate KYC as much as the next guy, right? Like, I understand that if you don't do KYC, you're breaking the law. Like, I wish you didn't have to do KYC. My problem, my libertarian problem with this, my problem isn't with I hate the whole KYC laws, but my problem is they created money out of thin air. They created a token that I know is useless from my knowledge of the blockchain. So my problem is they cheated. So to me, if I was a competitor of theirs, I would say, hey, if they're going to be allowed to create money out of thin air with an ICO token, why am I not allowed to do the same? I want to break the security law as well. I want to create my own $15 million also, so I can pay better developers, so I can compete.
Why don't you do it, Tone? I mean, you're gonna have a conference, coming up soon. Why don't we launch this?
I don't like breaking the law.
Tone coin.
No, because it's to me, this is I mean, they're cheating, and I think the reason why other exchanges don't stand up and say something and try to go after them for it is because something like Coinbase, for example, they want to trade their scam coin and just profit off of people trading the scam coin instead of actually saying, hey, how come we have to go out and raise funding and these guys can print their own money? Anyway.
Well, did you see Matt Leasing's article today about Tether and Noble Bank and how he saw the money behind Tether might actually be there?
No, I haven't seen it, but now that we're back on Tether, any thoughts? I mean, Bill, haven't heard from you in a little while, and then we'll go back to David and Adela. Your thoughts on the whole Tether criminal probe thing, which I think is coming 2 years too late. You should have regulated this stuff to begin with, and then we wouldn't have this, question if the money is or isn't there. We have no idea.
So, I've been following this theory, and I don't want to call it a conspiracy theory because I don't know anything about it, to be candid. The mechanics about how Tether was supposedly used to pump the price of Bitcoin. We saw this as a narrative a lot in the second half of last year.
I didn't believe it.
I don't exactly understand the mechanics of it. I mean, I know that perhaps, you used it to, I don't know. I get financial scams. It's kind of my business to understand those. So I don't get it. However, I will say this, to the extent that there is something there that is being used to manipulate the market, this looks very similar to me like the foreign exchange antitrust cases and the gold manipulation and the silver manipulation cases that we've seen with Justice Department enforcement actions, and then you get large antitrust class actions that come out. So I can say that myself and some other very top antitrust attorneys in the US are taking a look to see whether something drops from the DOJ. And if it does, it's going to be a very big antitrust class action, most likely. But if there's something there, if there isn't, then who knows?
I actually, I'm going to throw in a quick comment, then we'll go to David. I get David or Sasha. So to me, all of the gold and silver manipulation stuff that I've seen, it's all been skimming in front of other people's trades. It wasn't printing money out of thin air to depress the price or to raise the price. It's always been hey, I know that the price of gold is, $840, but I'm going to tell the world that it's $840.08 because now I'm cheating and I can make 8 cents just that day, and I can do this every day with large amounts. It wasn't pumping the price indefinitely. It was just skimming little tiny bits. All right, David, get on a call. Unless you want to say something else to that effect. Bill, we'll go to Sasha and Adela.
Yeah, I'm just going to leave it broad at this point because I don't really know. Like I said, I never really understood the details of the mechanics behind the theory.
Wait, I want to make fun of Bill for a second. Can I just say Bill called himself the top antitrust lawyers? Bill, dude, you got to start saying that. You are the top antitrust lawyer.
No, thank you. No, I wasn't referring to myself. I was referring to some others. But thank you.
I'm saying, dude, step up. Grab the mantle.
Someday.
Don't let people take that away.
Someday, when I have more gray hairs, perhaps.
I don't know. What I missed? What was the highlight, Sasha? What was the best thing someone said so far on the show?
Oh, I think you just pointed it out. Bill calling himself the best antitrust lawyer.
Listen,
Bill, I know you didn't say it. I'm just teasing. Yeah, my take on Tether, though, I did a podcast with this CPA, Kara Haas, a few weeks ago, and she's been following the price move, like the price fluctuations, but also the Tether wallet. And she is very skeptical of the whole situation. And she tweets about it every day now. It's really interesting when she sees all the movement going on their wallets on the Block Explorer. But she was saying what they had, so they were supposed to have an attestation, but they just got some consulting firm to perform their audit. And they saw that they had the money in the bank that one day, but that doesn't mean that it's there every day. And it's certainly not a full audit, but apparently they've been trying to get companies to do an audit for them and everyone's declining to do it. So I think it's kind of interesting that the CFTC is probing into it because that will probably get to the bottom of it. And actually in the podcast I did with Kara, she was kind of talking negatively about Tether or the risk of it. And I was surprised. It was one of my most viewed podcasts and everyone had very differing opinions. Like the older people in Bitcoin had a lot of respect for Bitfinex. And after they got hacked, they created Tether, they did something to try and replace people's money. And it was thought to be kind of the crypto way to do it. And then now all these banks are coming in, making their own stable coins and competing against them. And anyway, it opened the door to a lot. It opened my mind to a lot of drama. There's that Bitfinex Twitter account. And anyway, I've been following it pretty closely on Twitter since then, but just kind of sitting back with the popcorn watching it.
Adela, any thoughts? No, you're okay. David, want to add anything to the Tether story, or Adela, jump in?
Well, I think that, we're looking at an article. I think when this article came out, I got quoted in CoinDesk. You got to start doing my PR for me, Tone. This is why I come on the show, so people think I'm what Bill called himself, one of the top dogs in, antitrust.
No, I did right here, man.
Oh, right,
I even read your statement.
Good. I didn't even know that was one of mine.
Right. No, I read it earlier. I mean, I don't want
to. But my whole point being is, I think on one of the other ones, I got quoted because I have a whistleblower case that I am the actual whistleblower tied to the whole Bitfinex and Tether probe. So I am literally part of the probe that the government is investigating, where I'm desperately trying to work with the SEC, with the CFTC. I've given over data to them, data dumps from professors, that this is going to take a while, but they are there. They're looking. I know people want them to jump in and actually do something, but it's going to take a while for them to do it and do it right. But it's getting done. I mean, there are going to be a lot of Main Street investors who get wiped out, but it's unfortunately part of the process, I guess.
Yeah, well, like what happened last time. If Tether blows up, that's good for Bitcoin, right? Because people would need a safety net, and that safety net is going to be Bitcoin. Yeah, see, I didn't want to, I mean, look at this. I have to look at you everywhere, man. What is this?
But wait, scroll down to the first line.
I know. I love it. It's right there. There you are.
Bulldog. I have not had food. This came out like 2 days before Thanksgiving. I literally was having 30 people and 3 fried turkeys. I am down 12 pounds since this article. I'm no longer allowed to eat food. I haven't had like booze. Everyone's been making fun of me for being fat. And
right, because
compliment.
when the first sentence in a Fortune article is heavy set.
So 12 pounds since November 21st. So it's been a month. I'm down 12 pounds in a month with no dieting.
Nice, good job. I'm gonna send you my food guide. I actually ended up losing like 15 pounds myself without.
Yeah, I saw you without a shirt on, and you know I saw the six pack.
So I have two things to say, right? Two very important things to say. Number one, if we could just go back to that picture of David for a second. It looks like a glamour shot. Can we just agree that if he goes missing, we cannot use this picture to find him? That's one. And another really sort of interesting one is TNABC. Is anybody doing that this year?
Yes.
No. Well, she lives there. That's not fair.
Another question. Tone, do you have psoriasis? Look at the ad.
What's psoriasis?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that ad on the side. Yeah.
Wait, what is psoriasis?
Wait, I'm fat and Tones is an old woman.
Is this time for me to say goodbye now?
Have I brought down the quality of the conversation since I've joined?
Always.
I can't get over David's like blue steel look. Like this is truly.
Wait, have you seen Adela? Have you seen the fake cover we made?
No.
Oh my God, the fake cover is even better.
All right, David, shoot that over to me. Okay, we got two more topics. I want to try and get your thoughts. This is interesting. U.S. Treasury Department sanctions Bitcoin addresses. What do you guys think of this? Now, again, our own Drew Hinkes, who I can't get back on the show, says, tweeted about this as well. Open questions from today's edition of Bitcoin addresses to the OFAC SDN list. I'm assuming that's the banned list. Do miners, nodes, and exchanges in the US have to block transactions from these addresses? Does this suggest or require code changes? So obviously you can't force code changes. Mr. Hodl, a very frequent Twitter troll that I actually like, one of the few, says, Drew, I think the only answer to that question is outlawing Bitcoin in the US. Drew disagrees. So what do you guys think of this? And what did they try to do? Why did they do it? I didn't read the details. I just know that the US government ain't going to get their way on this one. That's not how Bitcoin works. Who wants to start? I'm not sure. I think, Bill, you have to go soon. Let's start with you. Oh, you muted.
Yeah, I had to unmute. No, this is actually just one of the most fascinating things topically for today. And I don't have a whole lot of commentary on it other than, I think that what we're going to see is that governments will try to capture Bitcoin and make it subject to whatever laws and whatever powers they are hoping to utilize. And so I think this was really a fascinating way to attempt to do that. So, we've talked on the show before that I think regulators, really one of the ways that they can try to control Bitcoin specifically is by regulating the on-ramps and the off-ramps and how you convert it into digital currency, fiat currency. That doesn't seem to be very useful at this point. I suspect, as you said, this is not going to change the code of Bitcoin, so this one would probably fail. And the more attempts to regulate and control Bitcoin fail, I think the stronger it gets. So that's my 2 cents. To regulate and control Bitcoin fail, I think the stronger it gets. So that's my...
Oh, that was coming from David's computer. I muted him. Hey, David, turn off our podcast. Adela, any thoughts? Hey, David, you're back.
Adela, any thoughts?
I'm going to mute David again.
Wait, I'm good.
You good now? Okay, go ahead, David.
I'm going to mute David. Wait,
nope.
Try this again. Do I blow back anymore?
No, you're okay now.
Okay. I know, this is just a step of what's happening. Anyone who thinks this isn't where we're moving is insane. This is just the government taking another small piece of freedom away from people who love freedom. Right, Sasha? Did I get it right this time?
All right. I wouldn't exactly call this small. All right. However, we do have to separate it here, right? Like the fact that they can tell exchanges what to do is one thing. But, I mean, Drew specifically talked about nodes and miners. Now, that's a different story altogether. So, Adela, thoughts on this? I think you're probably the biggest libertarian in this group.
Yeah, just give me a second. I'm just doing one thing.
Okay, Sasha, we'll go to you.
Sure. I think they can enforce this at the exchange level. So, or ATMs that have a compliance program set up. If someone can use block scanners to find this address and block transactions for them, or if they receive a transaction from these addresses, they can hold onto the coins and notify the authorities. But in terms of stopping people from mining Bitcoin at a overall level, because I think initially when this happened, a ton of people spammed those addresses. So if Bitcoin was going to stop, mining because those addresses had a transaction after OFAC put out the notice, then we wouldn't still have Bitcoin going today. It would be. I think that the only way to enforce this is at the exchange level. And also you can't really control if you and I were, Tone, you were selling me your bicycle and, just out a one-off transaction. And I had an address that was blocked by OFAC. And I sent it to you. You would have no way to know that I was, blocked at an individual level. So I think
Sasha, I wouldn't, but I think they're going to try and go after the wallets because the wallet might know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying too. The wallets can stop those transactions from happening, or the exchanges, can see it ahead of time and stop it. But otherwise, it's pretty hard. And it's so silly too, in a sense, because how hard is it to create a new Bitcoin address and never use that address again? Maybe there's a lot of Bitcoin in it, and that's what they're trying to prevent, is from those Bitcoin being moved. But
yeah, no, I got you on that one. All right, so let me see here. Hold on. Without doxing myself and everyone else. Hey, here's that picture of our own David Silver, and we'll cancel that. I like this better. What's wrong with this?
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, that was great. Why didn't they use this?
I thought the title was the best part of it.
From a villain to
don't make fun of me on mute.
Well, I always thought you were both.
But like, seriously, man, I'm not thinking I'm that fat. I'm like an extra 10 pounds in these pictures. I mean, I'm like,
this picture is my
chin. You got the sagging chin.
So yeah, supposed to be slimming.
Professional photographers do wonders.
Well, this was a professional photographer. I'm a little pissed he didn't take away my second chin. That's the problem when you don't know the ownership to it.
Yeah, see, no, I've been around professional photographers too, which is why if anyone ever sees my Tinder picture, they'll never know that it's me because it was done by a professional photographer. So I have nothing to worry about.
Hey, we should talk about blockchain terminal. It's my favorite legal story of the last 2 weeks.
Wait, I don't know what this is. I don't have an article.
God, you haven't heard about this?
I've been a little busy lately traveling the world. What is this? What is this story?
While you find it, I will say something about the recent Iran thing.
Say something about what?
The recent Iran thing.
Go ahead, Adela. You have the floor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Weren't we just talking about Iran?
Oh yeah, well, actually, I wanted someone to explain why they were banning the addresses. I know it's in the article. But I didn't really read the details. What was it, like some Iranian people tied to terrorism or something have received a little bit of Bitcoin?
Well, this is really interesting to me because in October this year, FinCEN released an advisory that stated that since 2013, Iran's use of virtual currency included at least $3.8 million worth of Bitcoin denominated transactions per year, which, I mean, doesn't really seem like a lot, right? But that advisory came right after the whole sort of like Trump blowout, right? So it had me sort of questioning I don't want to say legitimacy because obviously I don't know what's going on, behind the curtains, yeah? But it just seemed that it came right after the whole Trump thing. And they're saying that while the use of virtual currency in Iran is comparatively small, virtual currency is an emerging payment system that may provide potential avenues for individuals and entities to evade sanctions. So that did come out from the US Treasury. I'm really wondering how much of this is actual risk and information based and not more policy based. They're asking they asked exchanges and peer-to-peer, actually registered exchanges and peer-to-peer exchanges to really just sort of look very carefully at payments or activity that has originated from Iran. And of course, to look at the SDN list, which if any, does anybody know what that is? I'm just gonna say it. It's the specially designated nationals and blocked persons list. That's what SDN. David, stop it. What is wrong with David?
Sorry, I'm reading another article that got named in. I'm so in love with myself today. You guys don't know how much it is. If I lose another 10 pounds, no one's going to love me as much as me.
You're moving up the ranks of being hated again by gloating so much, right? All right, I'm muting them. Keep going, Adela.
Right. So let's talk about serious stuff again. So exchanges were asked to monitor transactions that originated from Iran. And of course, I mean, with VPNs, how realistic is an enforcement of that sort of thing? Again, I always ask myself when these things come out, how much of that is actual risk-based direction versus, just knee-jerk policy. Because, $3.8 million a year in Bitcoin denomination doesn't really sound like that much. Like, what kind of broke-ass ratchet terrorism, thing are you funding with that?
And we don't even know if that's how much was the total. Like, it could have been like, for example, you look at a wallet sometimes and you're like, 100 Bitcoin went through this wallet, and you're like, holy shit, they have 100 Bitcoin. In reality, the final balance is like 3, right? Because it was Bitcoin in and out. You're like sending it to each other, basically. So a lot of these statistics are so flawed.
Absolutely, Tone. And that actually brings up a very important question, which is, how much of this information, because there's no citation to this, since they cite in this, they state in the advisory that since 2013, Iran's use of virtual currency includes at least $3.8 million worth of Bitcoin denominated transactions per year. But where's the citation? Like, where did you get that from? Did you get that from, CoinDance? Like, where did you get that from,
Yeah, and not to mention more and more people are starting to use mixers. We're gonna have Bitcoin is on the verge of having privacy Monero can only dream of. And I mean, all of this is kind of pointless at this point.
What kind of methodology? I know at this point that the Treasury does have a designated crypto sort of, expert team, right? But what kind of methodology are they using to do this? Is, Chainalysis helping them on the side? Like, what's going on? I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. They're going to have to provide that info. All right. Any other thoughts on this? Sasha, David? Got on mute.
I just think that, it's funny. You were saying mixers. It's not like mixers are a new thing. Mixers have been around forever. So, I mean,
they're getting they're getting much better and a lot more user friendly. They're not the same mixers that have been around forever.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that they're getting better, but it's like everything else. It's going to be a foot race about who gets out in front of this faster. Regulators stopping people from being able to make chains, shielded transaction chains, versus chains that claim to be shielded transaction chains. So, the regulators always have to adopt to the technology. So I do think there's always going to be someone who claims to create a better shielded transaction to help people do the things they want to do without being caught online.
Sasha, your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess it'll just be interesting to watch it play out. I wonder how many more addresses we'll have on that list this time next year.
Oh yeah, there's probably going to be a lot more. Hey David, if you want to send me that link to your other story, I'll pull it up.
I sent you the link to the BC terminal.
You did? Where did you send it?
Blockchain terminal.
Oh, I got it.
So for those who don't know about Blockchain Terminal, they raised $31 million. And about a week ago, it turns out that the guy who was running the ICO was really someone else. Actually, go to the second link. I sent you the wrong one first. That was the article that made me laugh talking about this one. So the guy who ran Blockchain Terminal ICO was a guy named Sean McDonald. It turns out that his real name is Boaz Manor, who ran an $800 million Ponzi scheme in Canada. We went to jail for 4 years and then was barred by the Canadian Securities Exchange. When he got caught, now here's what gets really interesting. I assume you guys all know Rand Neuner.
Yes. Yeah, I've been on the show like 6 times.
Well, he's tied into this.
Really?
So this article written by The Block, Frank Chaparro wrote the article, gets published. I think it's their biggest biggest article to date, readership-wise. Exposes that Sean McDonald is really Boaz Manor. To show what a fraudster Boaz Manor is, he goes on a show called The Crypto Crow without a lawyer and admits to the whole thing. Says I've
been on that show as well.
He comes back and says, "Yep, that's me." Crypto Crow admits before he does, says, "I am a paid marketer of Blockchain Terminal." Blockchain Terminal claims to have gone through the $30 million raised already and has no money left. And it turns out when they start investigating for the lawsuit that Sean McDonald really doesn't exist. His name is Boaz Manor, and he's a former fraudster criminal. Rand gets thrown into this because Rand was an advisor for the company, claims to have put $350,000 of his own dollars in through a SAFT. Now, there's some debate about whether he bundled some other money that's part of this article, which was the second link because everyone's threatening defamation lawsuits. But Blockchain Terminal has threatened to sue the writers because they say it's unfair to say the truth about Sean McDonald, that they shouldn't be allowed to expose Sean McDonald as Boaz Manor, a fraudster, and that it was immaterial that he was using a fake name and was barred by the Securities and Exchange Commission and spent time in jail for an $800 million fraud.
Wow, you're right. This is insane. So, how else is Rand tied into this? Like, was he talking about this coin on his show on CNBC? Because that can get really interesting.
It's really interesting. Rand writes a response to this. So one of the guys at The Block does a tweet storm, Larry Cermak.
Yeah, we talked about him earlier. The guy who seems to be unreasonably in love with Binance, who I think is who are the company that I personally hate. But yes, I don't even know what. I have too many links open. I'm not going to go back.
Yeah, so Larry was one that did the tweets that you had up when I first came on the show.
Yeah.
So he then goes on a tweet storm saying, as bad as Boaz Manor is, Rand's even worse. Rand on his webpage claims to have a disclosure that he discloses every project he's invested in. Well, it turns out that he doesn't. After he finds out that Sean McDonald is Boaz Manor, he takes Blockchain Terminal off of his page of disclosures and doesn't disclose that he knows the guy's a fraudster. So there's a lot tied to that when you start doing when you're a promoter, when you're someone like Rand. I think if the article's right and that Rand raised 1.2 million and sold like 900,000 as a bundler to other people, the Rand's got some problems.
Yeah, so that's gonna be an issue. Yeah, hey, thank you for. I just got a pair of images. I'm gonna pull those up. I guess I should have just done this the easy way. I'm gonna attempt not to dox anyone, especially myself, by taking this, throwing it over here, and let's see what we got. Thank you for sending these over. So this is apparently some kind of a private conversation that went public.
I don't think we should put them on. I just sent it for us to read.
That's fine. That's public already. Tone, that's public.
Yeah, it has to be public. I've seen these before.
Yeah, this is totally public. It's amazing. He says somewhere in here, I'm in Africa. They kill people who kill people and go to jail for like.
I read these. These were on Twitter. I read it, but I didn't know the context, right? And people are like, Tony, you got to look into it. And I'm like, why? What's the point? It's another ICO. They're all the same. Like, I didn't really care. But what's the context behind it? Like, do we know who's the?
Yeah, so it's him and Sean Manor Sean McDonald / Boaz Manor.
Oh, this is the conversation with Sean McDonald.
Yeah, this is him and the CEO when they're fighting about people knowing that he's a fraud and Rand demanding his money back.
Oh, so this is no, but I thought they were accusing Rand of fraud.
Well, they are because they're saying Rand knew about this and didn't tell people. You can't promote something and sell things, then learn about the fraud and not tell other people if you find that you're their financial advisor who brought them in.
But wait, so who is Rand talking to in this conversation?
Sean McDonald.
But Sean McDonald's the scammer. So Sean McDonald is the Boas guy, right?
Yes.
Right. So he's the scammer. So the scammer is accusing Rand of being a bigger scammer?
Yes. In that tweet storm, in that text storm, the scammer is telling Rand he's the bigger scammer, saying you knew this was going on. You knew this was going on and you did nothing to stop it.
That's amazing.
It is. This is crypto perfected.
This is this might be more interesting than the whole BitConnect thing, though. Unfortunately, not on as big a scale.
Yes, but there's going to at least be people to pay money. If she sent you all of them, I think the next batch of texts has the one where he talks about people going to jail when the people don't go to jail in Africa.
Oh no, I read that part. Yeah.
No, I think that's on the next slide. Sasha probably sent you.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, these are public. I've seen them.
They're completely public. They got published. I actually have a whole tweet storm. To this day, it's my most liked retweeted tweet I've ever done.
On your channel?
On like my Twitter, I did a whole thing. It was the first time I ever did multiple tweets in one tweet. I'm trying to become more Twitter savvy, learn how to use Twitter.
I see. I'm trying to become more Instagram savvy.
See, I don't do Instagram.
I'm sorry. Can we talk about why Drew has like 7,000 followers?
Is that too? That's too little. I'm assuming, right?
No, I never use Twitter, but Drew, come on, that guy, really?
But he uses it all day, every day.
Yeah, the academic community loves Drew.
No, Drew. I don't like that guy. I always thought there was something very sketchy about him. So, just saying.
So yeah, this is the whole.
I'm gonna get a call from him right now.
So this is it?
Yeah, that's it.
All right, hey guys, check this out. We'll add these articles to the video description. We should follow the story. Maybe we should cover it in the near future. Oh wow, okay, that was a big tweet storm from you.
Yeah, well, it's the first time I ever did more than one. So.
Are you you're not suing them for anything, right? You're just watching.
Yeah, I'm just watching this one. I'm happy if someone actually bought stuff from Rand, but I mean this is just an ICO gone bust at this point. But it's got weird things. The lawyer for BC Terminal, who filed the lawsuit against the block, is the woman who signed the Reg D for the ICO. I mean, the story has crazy things all over it.
Wait, what was the ICO? What the hell was the blockchain terminal?
there's like a picture, it's supposed to be like a fake Bloomberg terminal for crypto.
Oh, great.
Scroll up, like it's a Bloomberg terminal for crypto. You passed it.
Yeah, no, this thing. Yeah,
it's
this.
just a screen. Yeah.
And they were ICOing it.
$31 million.
Beautiful. All right. Okay. So do we have time for one more story or we can let it go? I was going to talk about the two lawsuits filed against Bitmain. One of them seems legit. The other one just seems hilarious. So the legit one is claiming they like used the equipment and they were selling like, bad equipment. So that's the one lawsuit. And then the other lawsuit is the Bitcoin Cash people, the other Bitcoin Cash people. So Craig Wright and Kelvin Ayers suing everybody and anybody involved in the other BCash for manipulating the market. Now, I actually think they have a partial claim because Roger Ver moved Bitcoin hash rate in order to defend their chain. And hey, your friend Jesse Powell there, David, is also named in this one. Like they just threw everybody in here. I guess that's what happens when you have money. You can just file. They're a Florida company. I don't know if you're involved in this.
Which one are you claiming is the better lawsuit? This one or the other one?
Well, whichever one you want to comment on, go for it.
Well, I just want to know your opinion. Do you like this one or do you like the other one?
I think the other one is more like real. I think this one is a little more of a joke. I can't believe this is actually being filed. I think I thought this was like an April Fool's gag when I read it initially, but it looks legit.
Well, it's not just legit. It's the second fanciest law firm in Florida who filed it. So the fact that they are paying a ton of money and Ackerman put their name on this isn't going away. Like, I'm dying to see what discovery leads to in this case.
Oh, this is going to be a discovery because they're naming individual names. That gets serious because, I mean, back on Wall Street, I was working for a company and it was a little company of about 70 people. And JP Morgan sold us, they owned us. So they sold our company to another company. None of us liked it and everyone pretty much quit. And these are like PhD Wall Street guys. So a lot of them went to a competing company to rebuild the product that we used to do. And then the company that we got sold to ended up suing the company that the people went to work for instead, claiming that they stole intellectual property. And that was insane. Like that was like a 5-year lawsuit. Like these people, like the 3 PhDs, like their lives were basically turned upside down. Like they have to get like all of their information, like all their personal devices. I mean, when you get personally named in one of these big lawsuits, it gets crazy. Like if this lawsuit goes through, like all of the private messages of like Roger Ver and all these other guys, they're going to be subject to discovery.
I doubt they're going to be able to serve Roger. I mean, Roger hasn't stepped foot in the U.S. in a while.
That's true. It might have jurisdiction there.
I mean, he's in where? Hong Kong now?
Yeah, but you know what? But you can file this internationally. I mean, that case that I'm talking about with our two companies, I can name the companies, but it doesn't matter. It was international. Like one of the guys was a British citizen. Another was I think a Swiss citizen.
Yeah, going through the Hague and doing things internationally. If Roger doesn't want to participate, he's not going to participate. What's a judgment against Roger in the U.S. going to do against Roger? He's not coming back.
Yeah, that's true. So what do you think of this? Like, did you read these things over?
I did. I think it's fascinating. I mean, it's true. Like, I don't think anyone disputes that the story they're telling is exactly how everything played out. The question is whether they weren't allowed to do what they did. And the court is going to have to interpret, I mean, what happened. But, I mean, you read it, Tone. Don't you agree this is exactly what happened?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't have time to read through the details of this. The only thing that I felt was, like, potentially liable was them taking the hash rate from their Bitcoin pool and pointing that hash rate towards the defend Bitcoin ABC.
Well, yeah, but that's essentially what the lawsuit is. Then they go into Jesse and how he picked the winner and he gave the title and the BCH to the winners and not everyone else. But effectively, I don't think there's much disputed fact here. And I think they did that intentionally. They wanted to tell the story accurately because they didn't want to come back and get sued by everybody.
Yeah, no, and I think that let's see where this goes. Like, I didn't expect this. I thought maybe I didn't know who. I thought it would be more like a class action lawsuit on behalf of those renting hash power from Bitcoin.com. But this is interesting. Calvin Ayers and Craig Wright filed this one.
Well, you keep saying that. Calvin Ayers and Craig Wright did not file this. They are not tied to it publicly. My understanding is they have no ownership or relationship to that particular company.
Interesting. So what is this company? Because from what I'm hearing in my back channels is that it was them. So what is
everyone agrees? Everyone agrees that it's Craig Wright and Calvin Ayers. Don't get me wrong. But they technically have nothing to do with this company.
So what is this company?
I think it's a mine. It's a shell company that's a mining company in South Florida.
Interesting.
But it's not like if you Google this and Craig Ayers or Craig Wright, you're going to pop up with their names.
Interesting. All right. I'm going to have to look into this a little bit more. All right. What about the other lawsuit? Any thoughts on this one about the equipment?
Honestly, until you put it up, I didn't even know it existed.
Okay. Bill, are you familiar with this one?
Yeah, I mean, I've read through it. You know, I have been a class action lawyer for about 15 years now, and you know, the last thing I want is other people to poo-poo on my lawsuits. So I'm going to avoid doing that in this case.
Bill, so say I'm the best of the best. I've been a class action lawyer for like 15 minutes. And I can tell you, I don't like the fact that they have different fonts in their complaint.
That's how you tell whether it's good.
All right, so we'll probably come back to it in a future show. Okay, so Bill, any thoughts on this United American Corp case?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just going to go with the word fascinating. I don't know that much about it. It hasn't been on my radar screen. I think that it's a case to watch. You know, when people come up with new permutations about how you can violate the antitrust laws, I think that has wide-ranging effects, and I'm very curious to see whether it really sticks or does not stick. What I would like to see is what a judge, because there's definitely going to be a motion to dismiss here. The defendants are going to come in, they're going to say, no, this theory is not one that, you know, that can be can create a cause of action under the antitrust laws. I'm curious what the court thinks about that. There's additional claims in here, you know, state law claims. You know, when you're getting in a case like this, case causes of action like unjust enrichment, I think you're probably grasping at straws if you don't have some specific statute that you can tie hang your hat on. Excuse me. I'm starting to be really unarticulate because I'm not paying attention anymore. I'm trying to multitask and it's going down the drain.
Bill just insulted my entire complaint writing by saying that, you know, if you use unjust enrichment, you're stretching. Unjust enrichment's in every one of my complaints. There's nothing wrong with these guys.
Listen, more power to you. David is a real paragon of an attorney if he can get money with unjust enrichment claims.
But these guys threw the kitchen sink. It's rare you see unjust enrichment to violations of the land, the different like securities antitrust acts.
Yeah.
Everything under the sun. They just want to survive a motion to dismiss.
Right, and as you said, you get into discovery, and it's going to be a shit show, and then there's lots of fun things to play with once you find that.
All right, guys. Hey, we do have to wrap the show up. David, you're coming to Vegas, right? Unconfiscatable, January 24th to 26th.
You are on my calendar. You're as committed as I get from being a month out. You're on the calendar.
Awesome. All right, so we'll see David there. I would love to get Adela back for a second, but I have to do another podcast. I have no idea if it's live or it's going to get pre-recorded. Today is like my podcast day. But thank you guys once again. Please check out the Unconfiscatable conference happening at the end of Vegas, and check out my other videos and the tonebase.com. Thank you to my guests. Bill, say your goodbyes.
Happy holidays, everybody.
David?
Hey, Tone, did you give the details to the conference?
About?
Your conference. Did you give people or listeners the details?
Only every day on my YouTube show. But are you coming, right, Adela?
Of course, I'll be there, Tone.
Awesome. And are you playing poker?
The last time I played poker was in St. Kitts with Roger Ver, but actually I just sat and watched. But in my head, it was sort of like I was playing. I could probably do the same.
I love in every conversation with Adela and Jason, they talk about playing something with Roger Ver.
Well, no comment, no further comment on that. But I mean, how many women, since we live in such a sexist world, I don't know if it's politically correct to ask like how many women are playing
in the poker game.
Yeah.
I'm expecting at least 10, so about 10%. About our average of women in blockchain, like 10%.
I don't like that tone. I think we should lobby for legislation or something to have at least a 50% woman buy-in.
Invite your friends. Ask your friends, please. Bring them.
Oh,
Goodbye, guys. Have a good holidays.
All right, David, have a good holiday.
David, don't leave yet. Tone, can you just give the details on the conference?
Oh, yeah, sure. So the conference will be January 24th to 26th. 24th is a Thursday. We will be doing workshops, Jimmy Song and myself. That evening is followed by the carnivory dinner. On Friday is more workshops, followed by the celebrity poker game. 100 people max. We already had about, I believe about 60 people have bought a ticket. I closed off registrations. I want to get celebrities in there like David, like Adela. You guys have to pay up the 0.1 Bitcoin and buy-in amount. And then whatever seats are left, I'll open it up again to the general public. Saturday is the full day of conference. I haven't made the agenda yet, but hopefully enough of my lawyers will show up. And not my personal lawyers, but lawyers from the Tone-Based YouTube channel will show up, and we'll try to do a law panel as well at the conference. So awesome. Thank you so much for coming, Adela. And hey, guys, if you want to come hang out with Adela and lots of other really cool people.
Thank you so much, Tone, man. Thank you. I'll see you in Vegas.
Awesome. See you then. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.